Welcome back to the Deep Dive by Tag Education, the academic guide. It is fantastic to be back with you, Matrix students.
Yeah, really great to be here again.
Last week, in our very first deep dive, we zoomed out to give you a macro overview of your entire grade 12 year, just, setting the stage for what is to come. But today, we are pivoting.
Right. Today is all about zeroing in specifically on your Term 1 Business Studies syllabus.
Exactly. We've spent the last week thoroughly analyzing the latest grade 12 Department of Basic Education guidelines, dissecting recent past papers, and reading through examiner reports to extract exactly what you need to know.
Because we want to provide you, the grade 12s, with a highly focused, predictive roadmap of the major themes dominating your first term. Plus a look ahead at the finish line assessments, right? The objective is for you to walk into your classroom not just prepared, but already understanding how the theoretical concepts connect to real-world application.
Okay, let's unpack this. Term 1 is essentially the bedrock of your entire grade 12 year. I mean, the framework you learn now will dictate how you analyze problems in Term 2, 3, and 4.
It really sets the tone for the whole year.
So let's start with the macro environment, specifically focusing on legislation. Basically, the government sets the boundaries of the market, and your syllabus introduces you to the 8 major laws that govern how South African businesses operate.
Which is, examiners often referred to legislation as the low-hanging fruit of the grade 12 syllabus.
Low-hanging fruit. I mean, legal text is usually so depth.
I know, it sounds counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But in the context of your exams, legislation is actually highly predictable. The Department of Basic Education doesn't expect you to be labor lawyers, They just expect you to understand the operational impact of these laws.
Right, and there are quite a few laws to process. Your term starts with an absolute alphabet soup of acronyms. You are going to encounter 8 key acts.
Oh boy, here we go.
Listen to this lineup. We have the SDA, which is the Skills Development Act, the LRA, the Labor Relations Act, the EEA, Employment Equity Act, the BCEA, Basic Conditions of Employment Act. Then we have COIDA, the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, the BBBEE Act, Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment, the NCA, the National Credit Act, and finally the CPA, the Consumer Protection Act.
Yeah, it sounds completely overwhelming when you list them back to back like that.
Which is exactly why we need to hit the brakes for a second. Matrix students, listen to me carefully. Do not stress if you feel completely lost hearing all these acronyms right now. Do not panic.
No, definitely don't panic.
Our very next deep dive is going to cover legislation in much more detail. And from there onwards, we are going to have dedicated individual deep dives breaking down each one of those acts one by one. You do not need to memorize them all today.
Yeah, for this Term 1 overview, you just need to internalize the core framework that examiners apply to every single act.
The core framework.
Exactly. If you understand the framework, you can apply it universally. It consists of 4 distinct analytical lenses. First up is the purpose or nature of the act.
Like, why did the government feel compelled to intervene in the free market in the first place?
Right. Generally, legislation is introduced either to redress historical inequalities or to protect vulnerable stakeholders like entry-level workers or consumers from exploitation.
So take the Skills Development Act, for example. The government looked at the macroeconomy and realized there was a massive shortage of skilled labor, which, stifles economic growth.
Right. It's a huge bottleneck.
Exactly. So the purpose of the SDA isn't to punish businesses. It's a deliberate intervention to incentivize training and upskilling the workforce.
Spot on. And building on that, the second part of the framework is the impact. This requires critical thinking because you have to evaluate both the advantages and the disadvantages for a business.
So it's not just black and white.
No, not at all. The SDA might eventually boost a company's productivity because their staff is highly trained. That's a distinct advantage. However, the administrative burden of filing compliance reports and the financial cost of the levies, well, those create a significant short-term disadvantage, especially for smaller enterprises.
Right. That makes total sense. And the third part of the framework is compliance. This is where theory meets daily operations. What are the practical, undeniable actions a business must actually take to follow the rules?
Yeah, and with the SDA, it is very clear. If a business has a payroll exceeding R$500,000 a year, they are legally obligated to register with SARS and pay a 1% skills development levy on that total payroll.
Right, and they have to submit detailed workplace skills plans to their relevant SETA.
Exactly, and that leads directly to the fourth part of the framework penalties.
The consequences.
Yeah. What happens if you just ignore the compliance requirements? The state does not just send a polite warning letter. Penalties can range from severe financial fines to formal compliance orders forced through the labor court. And, well, in the most extreme cases of negligence, the business could have its operating licenses revoked entirely.
Wow. So it's like learning the rules of a new sport. You can't even step on the field until you know it counts as a foul. But knowing the rules of the game doesn't give you a strategy to actually win the game.
No, it keeps you out of trouble.
Right. Just avoiding penalties doesn't generate profit or capture market share. So if legislation sets the rules, how do businesses actually figure out how to play and win? That brings us to the next major phase of your syllabus, which is business strategies.
Yeah, because the macro environment is so volatile. Laws change, interest rates fluctuate, new technologies emerge. Businesses are constantly under pressure. To survive and thrive, management has to systematically analyze these external pressures and formulate highly specific strategies in response.
But before you can formulate a strategy, you have to gather intelligence, right? You need to scout the playing field and understand your own capabilities. Grade 12s, you are going to learn how to use industrial analysis tools, and you cannot skip mastering these.
No, you absolutely cannot.
They form the basis of almost every single case study you will write. You will look at the SWOT analysis, the PESTLE analysis, and Porter's 5 forces.
And these tools operate at different magnifications. SWOT requires a business to look internally at its own strengths and weaknesses, like having exclusive patents or maybe suffering from high staff turnover. Then it looks externally at opportunities and threats in the immediate market.
And then PESTLE is much broader, right?
Yeah, PESTLE is a wide-angle lens scanning the broader macro environment. It forces the business to evaluate political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors.
Let's contextualize PESTLE for a second. Say you run a logistics company, and the PESTLE analysis reveals an upcoming economic threat, maybe a massive spike in global fuel prices. You immediately know your current business model is going to bleed cash.
Yep, you're in trouble before you even start.
Right. And you haven't even looked at your competitors yet. When you do look at the competition, you use Porter's 5 forces. This analyzes the power dynamics in your specific industry. It measures the power of your buyers to negotiate prices down, the power of your suppliers to hike up material costs.
It also looks at the intensity of existing competitors, the threat of customers substituting your product for something completely different, and of course the threat of new businesses entering your market.
Okay, so once a business has used SWOT, PESTLE, and Porter's to diagnose the environment, they must prescribe a solution. They have to execute a strategy. Your syllabus categorizes these into 4 distinct playbooks. The first category is integration strategies,
Which is essentially about gaining control over the entities you usually interact with.
I always find integration fascinating because it is so aggressive. Like, forward vertical integration is when a business takes control of the people who sell their products. Think of a massive coffee bean farm deciding to buy out a chain of retail coffee shops so they can control the final price the consumer pays.
Right. And backward vertical integration is the opposite. It's buying your suppliers to secure your raw materials, like a car manufacturer buying a steel plant.
And horizontal integration is simply buying out a direct competitor to instantly increase your market share and, eliminate a rival.
Exactly. Now, the second playbook covers intensive strategies. This is when a business doubles down on its current operations to aggressively improve its competitive position.
So things like market penetration.
Yeah, market penetration involves pushing hard to sell more of your current product in your current market, usually by dropping prices or launching massive marketing campaigns. Market development is taking that existing product into a brand new geographical territory or demographic.
And product development is inventing a new, upgraded product to sell to your existing loyal customer base.
Spot on. If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, what if the market you are in is slowly dying?
That is where the third category, diversification strategies, becomes vital. This is entering completely new markets or adding entirely new products.
Yeah, like concentric diversification, which is adding a new but related product like a smartphone manufacturer starting to sell smartwatches.
Oh, I see. And horizontal diversification is adding a completely unrelated product that might still appeal to your current customers.
Exactly. And conglomerate diversification is the ultimate risk, adding completely unrelated products for completely new customers. A tech giant suddenly buying a national chain of organic grocery stores, that's conglomerate diversification. They do it to spread their financial risk across entirely different industries.
And sometimes, despite all the planning, the environment turns hostile, which necessitates the final category, defensive strategies. This is pure survival mode, right?
Absolutely. Divestiture is selling off entire divisions or departments of the business that are no longer profitable. Retrenchment is the incredibly difficult process of terminating employee contracts to drastically reduce operational costs.
The liquidation is the absolute last resort, where the business just accepts defeat, sells all its assets to pay off creditors, and closes its doors permanently.
Yeah, it's brutal, but sometimes necessary.
Let me jump in here with a vital piece of advice based on what we've seen in the examiner reports. Grade 12s, when you are writing your exams, specifically Section B and Section C, you cannot just list these strategies and expect to get marks.
Oh, definitely.
You are going to be given a complex scenario, like a detailed story about a business facing a crisis. You have to diagnose the exact problem, recommend the specific strategy, and then this is the non-negotiable part you must quote directly from the text to justify your recommendation.
The examiners are incredibly strict on this. If the scenario describes a business heavily discounting its shoes to clear inventory, and you just write down market penetration, you will lose the application marks.
Wait, really? Just for not quoting?
Yes, you must write market penetration and then follow it with motivation. The business lowered prices to sell more existing products, quoting word for word from the case study. They want proof that you can apply theoretical concepts to real-world evidence.
Exactly. It's about showing the mechanism of your thinking. Now, looking at this massive list of strategies, a natural question arises for me. Why wouldn't a business just find one highly profitable strategy, like market penetration, and ride that wave forever? Why go through the risk of changing a winning formula?
Because, as PESTLE analysis proves, the environment never stays still. I mean, a market penetration strategy might generate record profits during an economic boom. But if a recession hits, or a competitor launches a disruptive new technology that makes your product obsolete, stubbornly sticking to that original strategy will drive the company into bankruptcy.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, a strategy that is brilliant today might force a pivot into a defensive retrenchment strategy tomorrow just to keep the lights on. Adaptability is really the only true competitive advantage.
Which brings us to the most unpredictable variable in any business, the human element. You can have a perfect understanding of the legislation, and you can draft a brilliant integration strategy, but, well, strategies are just ink on paper until people actually execute them.
So true.
And that transitions us into the third major component of your Term 1 syllabus, business operations, specifically focusing on the human resources function.
The HR department is responsible for managing the life cycle of every person in the organization. If your macro strategy is aggressive product development, you need an HR function capable of identifying, attracting, and retaining the most innovative engineers in the country. In Term 1, you have to master the sequential steps of the employee life cycle.
That life cycle begins with recruitment, basically sourcing a pool of potential candidates.
Right.
The business has to decide whether to recruit internally, promoting someone who already understands the company culture, or externally, bringing in fresh talent and new perspectives from outside.
Right. And once you have a stack of CVs, the HR department moves to selection. This is not just a casual sorting exercise. It is a highly rigorous risk management process. A bad hire can cost a business hundreds of thousands of rands in lost productivity and training costs.
The selection procedure involves meticulously screening CVs against the minimum job requirements, conducting thorough background and reference checks to verify qualifications, and shortlisting the strongest candidates.
And that short list moves into interviewing, which is a formal, structured mechanism to evaluate the candidate's technical skills and cultural fit.
Assuming the candidate passes the interview and is offered the job, we move to placement, which is deliberately assigning the new hire to the specific role where their unique skills will generate the most value. But after placement comes induction.
Oh, yes. Induction.
And when you analyze past metric papers, the examiners seem to have an absolute obsession with testing the induction process. Why is induction such a hot topic for grade 12 exams?
I think it's because induction is the ultimate calibration phase, right? It's where a civilian is transformed into a compliant, productive part of the business machinery.
That calibration is critical, yeah. Induction isn't just a tour of the office and showing them where the coffee machine and fire exits are. It is the formal process of integrating the employee into the corporate culture, setting performance expectations, and crucially educating them on the business's policies and procedures.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is exactly where the different parts of your syllabus collide.
They absolutely do. Examiners love the induction phase because it allows them to test the human resources function and macro legislation in a single question.
Right, the overlap.
Exactly. During induction, the HR manager has to explain the working hours and leave days, which must strictly comply with the BCEA. They have to outline the grievance and disciplinary procedures, which are governed by the LRA. And they must ensure the new hire understands the company's anti-discrimination policies, leaning directly on the EEA.
Spot on. And they will likely identify any immediate upskilling the employee needs, which ties right back into the SDA. Induction is the exact point where national laws dictate daily business operations.
It is such an elegant way for examiners to see if you understand the holistic nature of business rather than just memorizing chapters in isolation. Beyond the life cycle, you will also need to understand how HR manages remuneration. I mean, how do you actually pay these people to keep them motivated?
Money talks, right?
It does. You will analyze the mechanics of piece rate paying a worker for every individual item they produce, which drives quantity versus time rate, paying a fixed monthly salary, which often prioritizes quality and stability.
Furthermore, remuneration isn't just cash. HR must strategically deploy fringe benefits like subsidized medical aid, pension fund contributions, or performance bonuses. These benefits are essential tools for retaining top talent so that competitors don't poach the very people executing your business strategies.
So, grade 12s, we have mapped out the terrain. You have the legislative boundaries, the strategic playbook, and the human resources required to run the plays. But knowing the theory is only half the battle, right?
It really is.
Knowing exactly when and how you are going to be tested on this knowledge is the other half. The theory has to meet the exam hall. So, let's look at the finish line. Your Term 1 assessments.
Your first major academic hurdle is going to be a formal, school-based assessment, the SBA. Specifically, this is a case study which counts for 50 marks. Based on the standard CAPS timeline, you can expect this to hit late February or early March.
And the case study format is entirely designed to test your application skills. They are not going to ask you to define PESTLE. They're going to give you a detailed, realistic narrative about a struggling business.
Yeah, you will have to read between the lines, identify which specific acts the business is unknowingly violating, analyze their environment using Porter's 5 forces, recommend corrective strategies, and justify everything with direct quotes from the text.
Like stepping into the shoes of a high-level business consultant.
Precisely. Following closely behind the case study is Controlled Test 1, hitting mid to late March. This is a comprehensive 100-mark paper. While the case study is usually heavily weighted towards the macro environment, legislation and strategy, the control test will encompass absolutely everything, pulling the entire human resources function into the mix. It is the ultimate test of your foundational knowledge.
Looking at that timeline, we have 8 complex laws, 4 major strategy categories encompassing over a dozen specific strategies, and a highly detailed HR lifecycle, all culminating in 2 massive assessments within a few weeks of each other.
This raises an important question. How on earth should a matrix student pace their studying so they aren't trying to cram a term's worth of interconnected theory the night before the case study?
Yeah, what's the game plan?
The answer is ruthless consistency. Because that 50-mark case study hits in late February, your macro environment theory must be locked in early. You should aim to have actively summarized and understood the 8 acts and the strategy tools by the 3rd week of February.
Makes sense.
Then, treat the HR function as your primary focus for March leading up to the control test. Break the syllabus down into digestible pieces. 1 piece of legislation a week, 1 strategy category a week. Consistency is the only way to build a foundation that won't crack under pressure.
That is incredibly practical advice. Small, consistent actions compound into massive results. Let's do a quick recap of what we've covered today. Our mission was to give you a clear roadmap of your Term 1 syllabus, and we have navigated the 3 core areas.
Right.
First, legislation. Understanding the boundaries of the market by applying the framework of purpose, impact, compliance, and penalties to the 8 major acts. Second, business strategies. Utilizing analytical tools like SWOT and PESTLE to diagnose the environment, and then formulating integration, intensive, diversification, or defensive plays to secure a competitive advantage.
And third, human resources. Managing the people who turn those strategies into reality, from recruitment all the way through to that critical, highly tested induction phase.
Exactly. And we've highlighted the targets you are aiming for. The 50-mark case study focused on application and quoting from the text in late February, and the comprehensive 100-mark controlled test in late March. Matrix students, we know this sounds like a mountain of information to process.
It is a lot, for sure.
But remember, your term one is the engine for the rest of your academic year. If you master this framework now, if you put in the deep focus work to truly understand how legislation, strategy, and HR all interlock, the subsequent terms are going to feel significantly more manageable. You are building the analytical skills you will use in your final exams right now.
Right.
Make that foundation unbreakable.
Definitely. And as you open your textbooks and begin your studies this week, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We often frame legislation like the Skills Development Act or the Basic Conditions of Employment Act as strict, burdensome rules that businesses are forced to endure. But think about the implications of the HR function. If a company's human resources department brilliantly leverages these laws to systematically train, protect, and reward their staff far better than any of their rivals do, could their strict legal compliance actually transform into their most powerful, aggressive competitive strategy?
Wow. Flipping a legal requirement from a defensive burden into an offensive competitive advantage, that is exactly the caliber of critical thinking the examiners are desperately looking for in your final papers. Keep mulling that over, grade 12s. Keep up the phenomenal work in your schools, stay focused on your goals, and remember that TAG Education will be right here with you for our next deep dive, where we will start breaking down that legislation in detail. Until next time.